How afraid of COVID are you? Or are you afraid at all? Some are still terrified. Those are the people you see wearing masks while they drive their car alone. And you do see those. More on COVID now and to come in a moment on Sherman Unlimited.
You wanted real talk, and this is where you'll hear it. Uninhibited by the toxic influences of cancel culture, unvarnished and unfettered, unencumbered by the censorship of traditional radio, uncontaminated by big media interests.
And now, Sherman Unlimited.
Could somebody tell me why the hell some of our leaders, by no means all of our leaders, but some of them, keep trying to scare the crap out of us with COVID? I can't tell you how many people I know who have had COVID in the past few weeks, but it's a lot. Very careful friends, many of my family, just not me, though I can't tell you whether or not I've ever had it yet. Anyway, in Florida, I had a few sore throat sick days, but back at that time, the self-tests were almost impossible to get, and the PCRs were being handled by Florida Public Health, and the lineups were 4+ hours long, so I got over the symptoms of whatever it was I had and went on with my daily routine. Was it COVID? Can't tell you. Notice President Biden's testing positive for a second time doesn't bother me if it doesn't bother him. Now, the media are saying that more people are getting COVID a second time, like Biden, which apparently increases the risk of long COVID. Okay, I'm not a medical professional. I don't know anything that you don't, but I follow what's going on around me. One thing going on around me is five deaths of relatively young physicians in the Toronto area. 5 doctors, male and female, basically aged 40 plus. Their institutions dispel completely any relationship to the use of COVID vaccines or anything else. And these untimely deaths, they are quality medical institutions, so I'm going to have to take those statements on trust, and I do. So whether or not vaccines have anything to do with some people getting sick will just remain a debate. I've personally, however, decided not to proceed with any more boosters. That's just me. I'm not recommending it. I'm not in a position to recommend it. I had my 2 initial shots, and then I had the 1 booster as soon as you could get it, I guess last fall. I called my doctor of long standing. I told him I was not keen on any more boosters. And he asked me if there was any particular reason. I said, no, I just don't want any more juice in me. And he told me that it probably wouldn't make much difference anyway. So if I felt better staying away from the booster, I'm talking about booster number 4, wasn't an issue. And trust me, he's a qualified and a very trusted physician. Anyway, I have some concerns about how things are presented politically these days. Not just about COVID. You take Monkey Pox, for example. There are some in the public health hierarchy who have commented on more cases being recorded. Seems that Canada has vaccines to cover us if or when it's required. This is for monkeypox. But wherever you hear about monkeypox, you hear them say that well over 90% of cases seem to be in males who have had intimate relations with other males. Now, I've never heard that phrase used before quite that way. You're talking about gay men. It's gay men, or you're not. Or are you so concerned about offending someone that you're afraid to say gay men? I have friends who are gay. Never been a big deal to me. Never been a big deal to them. I'm not gay, and no one who is has ever asked me what it is I do in the bedroom. And I've never felt the need to ask them the question either. So who cares? If you're someone I enjoy, someone I spend time with, and you and I don't care about your sexuality, but if that sexuality puts you in the danger zone for monkeypox, I think you'd want to know about that, as would I. So I'd tell you, or maybe you'd tell me. Can someone out there tell me if monkeypox and vaccination for it is of any concern to old fart hetero males like me, or kids, or everyone else, or anyone else? Jesus. Talk about walking on eggshells. Anyway, as I've mentioned, I live in the Toronto area, as does music star Drake. Well, Drake has COVID. Big news in Toronto. Hey, get well, Drake. If the last couple dozen people I know who have gotten this thing are the benchmark, plan on being out in the world doing whatever it is you like to do by the weekend. You think we have a lot of infections now? The health geniuses say that the coming winter is going to eclipse anything we've seen to date. as in 1 million plus infections daily in the United States in just a couple of months. The whole thing has been talked to death. We had this goddamn virus that dropped in around 3 years ago and never left. It's like the guests that, you dismiss them by saying, hey, honey, let's go to bed. Maybe they want to leave. That's COVID. Anyway, these days, the friends and family I've been referring to have told me they basically got a mild cold. In one case, someone I trust a lot volunteered that of all the illnesses he's had in his life, COVID gave him a discomfort level of about a 3 on a scale of 10, where 10 was as sick as he'd ever been. So why am I talking this up today? Because the thing has become ubiquitous. It's become lasting. It's not going anywhere. Will it keep mutating? Of course it will. That's what viruses do. But do we start thinking about lockdowns and social distancing and masking everywhere again? Well, you can think about it all you want, but woe betide the government that makes decisions like that. Nobody's scared anymore. COVID has become one of a number of things that you can get, and far from the worst of the things that are on that list. My advice to myself is to spend a lot of time outdoors, not to hang out in heavy congregate locations like jammed sports arenas, and I'm talking about this winter, not now, and to work at being healthy. And that's something that we can all work harder on. No matter how hard you work, you can work harder on being healthy. Full stop. Period. Oh, and one more word to you people with the verbal flamethrowers out on Twitter. Get off your high horses and leave the rest of us the hell alone.
Once again, Peter Sherman.
Over the past few weeks, my recreational reading has included a book by one of the, if not the, foremost amongst indigenous Canadian authors. I loved it. The writer is, of course, Thompson Highway. I've never met the man, but he writes a memoir entitled Permanent Astonishment, Growing Up in the Land of Snow and Sky. First, I love this book because it gave me so much insight. We Euro Canucks are low on insight into how our native brothers and sisters lived, as much as we're low on the information about what the indignities were they may have suffered in that endeavor. Here's what got me. Highway was literally born in a snowbank and raised in the subarctic, where his father worked intensely to give the family a good life. The town was Brochet, Manitoba, which in Thompson Highway's childhood was isolated, had no plumbing, had no running water, no electricity. You hunted, you fished, you knew the edibles from the forest, but the harsh weather and lack of readily accessible medical help meant that many like Highway, including 5 of his siblings, perished for lack of available care. In a nutshell, Thompson Highway was the son of fantastic parents who cared for, provided for, and taught him and his siblings very well, notably under their difficult circumstances, which were very likely much as practiced going right back to before Canada even was Canada. The difference being there were markets for the skins and the fish that Joe Highway produced for the Hudson's Bay Company and others, and they were able to live from that. The interesting aspect of Highway's life dealt with in the book were his years of attendance at a residential school, the Guy Hill Indian Residential School in La Paw, Manitoba. His descriptions made the place sound like it was very regimented, but useful, and generally fun for him. He learned piano prodigiously, and he learned English and interpersonal skills. And the treatment that he describes sounds like it was pretty good. There is a brief description in it of a pedophile brother, as in Catholic brother, who was in residence as a keeper, watched over the young boys sleeping at night. And this fellow was there for several years and did his share of fondling. But other than that, Thompson Highway doesn't write of any fear. He writes of accomplishment. You can't write the way Thompson Highway writes without a gift. But like any gift, it has to be nurtured. And his nurturing came from exemplary parents who willingly sent their sons away to get the first major leg of a formal education. Highway makes no mention of residential schools in the way Southern white Canadians have had those places represented to us. I don't know Thompson Highway. What a great interview he'd make. Maybe I'll get him one of these days. Perhaps he'd have a lot to say on the subject of residential schools. Maybe one of those things might be that they were not all horrific places that violated every kid or let them die of whatever and saw to their burials in unmarked graves on the school grounds. Anyway, I don't know that, but I'd love to do the interview. The book is well worth buying, well worth reading, and again, it's called Permanent Astonishment Growing Up in the Land of Snow and Sky. I raised the issue of the book to lead it to something else. The book, as mentioned, is wonderful, but it opens the door to a discussion. The day I'm recording this episode of Sherman Unlimited is Emancipation Day. That's the day the British Empire outlawed slavery back in 1834. People came out to celebrate in music, dance, poetry, presentations, and maybe a few wanted to say how sorry they were. We in Canada have an almost inbred need to apologize. We apologize to the Japanese community for interning them in camps during World War II. We apologized to the Jewish community for not allowing the MS St. Louis to dock in Canada and free about 900 Jewish European refugees. And the Pope's recent visit certainly was one whopping apology for the misdeeds of the past committed against Native Canadians. Now, I'm not going to say that apologies for past errors don't serve any purpose. They do, in the sense that people from various backgrounds, and God knows we Canadians come from pretty much everywhere, people from various backgrounds need to know that their co-inhabitants, the co-inhabitants of their land, know about them and care about them. There is a big however here, though. Aside from our indigenous population, every single one of the rest of us, or our ancestors, came here to Canada to escape from somewhere else. Persecution usually, not always. Sometimes it was just for the opportunity of a better life, better opportunities. Risks be damned. On a personal level, I never expected an apology for anything. I'm a Canadian because my German Jewish refugee dad was forcibly taken from his job in England and interned there. So this dentistry student in Hamburg leaves his homeland because he can't take the persecution of a rising Hitler, finds refuge with relatives living in England, but when the war gets bad for the Brits, they round people like him up. And if you have a German passport, and he did, Jewish or not, the dentistry student gets sent to work farming berries for the Chivers people. And when the war gets even worse for the Brits, guys like my dad were rounded up again and dispatched to what we'll loosely call the colonies. My dad got Canada. He didn't choose it. His ship limped into Quebec City. He was bused to the eastern townships. He was interned there in a camp under the watchful eyes and bayonets of the Canadian Armed Forces for 4 years. He was on the internee side of the barbed wire. The POWs were on the other side. So he and his mates worked in a lumber mill off-site for 4 years, and when the war ended, my dad got a few bucks and a bus ticket to Montreal, and he built a life. I'm not telling you this story because I feel bad or because you should feel bad. Frankly, my dad didn't feel bad. He was happy. He'd lost his parents, he'd lost his homeland, but he felt until the day he died that his good fortune was to live out his life in what is arguably one of the top destinations in the world, to live out a life. He loved Canada, and he'd have rejected any apology for anything because he didn't feel one was ever owed. Quite simply, my father is my model for the statement I made a moment or two ago about most Canadians from the current or prior generations wound up here to get away from there, wherever there was. Apologies are okay, but let's not apologize every chance we get. Some people wound up in Canada by chance and in pretty difficult situations, but they went on to help build the country, to build families, to build lives. They thank Canada for its traditional way of life. They expect nothing in return. I'm Peter Sherman.
Sherman Unlimited.
Let Peter know what's on your mind. Drop him an email. info@petersherman.com.
Find future episodes wherever you find your favorite podcasts. So if you like what you've heard, tell a friend. If you really liked it, tell 3 friends. If you really hated it, tell 3 enemies. We'll talk again soon.